Captainmidnight.
This video is brought to you by Skillshare. So by the time you're watching this, I'll probably be deep into the story of Spider-Man Miles Morales on the PS4, which I'm guessing I'll make a video about next week. But, you know, I am in a Spider-Man mood, so I figured I'd finally get around to talking about some of the rumors about the next MCU Spider-Man film. But I'd also like to have a good time and talk about what I want to see in a live-action Spidey movie that borrows the Spider-Verse concept. In July of 2017, I actually pitched my take on a Spider-Verse film, only to see a few of those things happen in animated form. But today, I want to go a little deeper. I want to talk about some of the big, long-shot ideas that I've always wanted to see. They'll probably never happen, but with Marvel getting weirder and more willing to experiment with things like WandaVision and the upcoming Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, I don't think these concepts are impossible, and with the confirmation that Jamie Foxx will be returning as Electro in some capacity, I think it's actually possible that Sony and Marvel are doing something that'll be really different with this next film. Speaking of Jamie Foxx, can we just acknowledge how weird that announcement was? Like, let's face it, Foxx's Electro was probably the most poorly received aspect of Amazing Spider-Man 2, and kind of for good reason. He feels like he's in a completely different film from the rest of the cast, except maybe Paul Giamatti. A much more over-the-top film too, like Batman and Robin or Batman Forever. In fact, if this performance reminds me of anything, it's Jim Carrey's Riddler, with a little bit more of an edge. So does that mean I'm dreading his return? Actually, no. Here's the thing, Jamie Foxx is a talented actor, and I think there's a world where he's a really great Electro, giving a very different performance than the one he gave here. It kind of remains to be seen how similar his performance will be, but honestly, I wouldn't count him out. Think about his menacing role in Baby Driver, and how much more effective and interesting Electro could be if he brought more of that energy to Max Dillon. I'm just saying, Jamie Foxx in a Spider-Man movie is still a good idea, even if I think they totally botched it the first time around. I'm really hopeful that his performance will be pretty different, even if he is still playing the Amazing Spider-Man 2 version of the character. But enough about Electro, let's talk about the elephants in the room. Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. It's rumored that Maguire could show up in the next Doctor Strange film, and that definitely feels possible. Like, after all, that's a film directed by Sam Raimi. But will that eventually add up to all three Spider-Men being together on screen? Who knows? In my 2017 video, I talked about how cool it would be to see an older Maguire mentor the Tom Holland Spidey, but a lot has changed since then. The biggest thing being that we've already had a film come out with a similar dynamic, with Jake Johnson's Spider-Man and Miles Morales. There's also been another MCU Spider-Man film in that time, which saw Peter look up to Mysterio for much of the movie. So if this were to happen now, I wouldn't want that dynamic anymore. We've seen Holland's Peter taken under the wing of so many other superheroes at this point that it would just kind of feel like a retread. Instead, I'd like to see the film comment directly on that trend, with Holland's Spider-Man realizing that he now has the strength and maturity to make his own choices, especially after seeing how the other Spider-Men basically had to work alone.
Spider-Man's getting ready to rumble. Oh no, it's Doc Ock, Venom, and the Green Goblin!
I guess my pitch would look something like this. I'd like to pick up with Tobey Maguire's Peter Parker, still going out there every day as Spider-Man, happily married to MJ, who is making a comfortable living as an actress. On paper, everything is going great for him. I mean, Aunt May is even still alive. Rosemary Harris is still working, so why not? But underneath that seemingly perfect life, Maguire's Peter is haunted. That's because a year or two before the film takes place, the events of Kraven's Last Hunt happened. For anyone unfamiliar with that comic, it's definitely one of the more traumatizing events in Peter's life, as it saw him being buried alive by Kraven the Hunter and coming much closer to death than Spider-Man usually does. It's really shaken him. Combine that with the fact that he's getting older and starting to feel his reflexes dull a little bit, and he's beginning to question whether he should finally hang up the suit. And maybe him and MJ even have a young daughter together as a nod to the continuity of Spider-Girl. All of that changes due to some magic multiverse stuff, probably caused by Doctor Strange, and he's soon confronted with the MCU Spider-Man and the MCU's Electro. They defeat Electro together, but soon realize they have a much bigger problem on their hands. Doctor Strange informs them that this has been caused by a time dilation accelerator, which fans might recognize from Spider-Man the Animated Series. He says that it was invented by the Otto Octavius of another Earth, which leads to Maguire's Peter telling Holland's Spidey all about the events of Spider-Man 2 and how his Otto almost annihilated New York City before sacrificing himself. He believes that Dr. Octavius is ultimately a good person, and if they could just tell this version of him that he's accidentally messing with the fabric of space and time, they could get him to stop, leading Strange to send both versions of Peter Parker into the world of the Amazing Spider-Man films. They come across Andrew Garfield's Peter Parker, but something feels off. This world is a lot more dystopian than we remember those films, and this Peter is far from his usual charming self. After he attacks them, we discover why. Taking a note from the Superior Spider-Man comics, in this world, Peter's mind has been taken over by Otto Octavius. But unlike in those comics, he hasn't done much learning or growing, morally. Building on the research that Peter Parker's parents died trying to hide in the Garfield series, Otto has basically used his powers as a scientist and as Spider-Man to create Parker Industries, much like he did in the comics. But here, he's almost like a dark inverse of Iron Man, a famous tech CEO / very public superhero who maintains the image of being benevolent, but who is actually closer to Homelander from The Boys than Tony Stark. So yeah, Andrew Garfield is playing the villain of this movie, a Peter Parker whose mind now belongs to Doc Ock. I'm sure some fans would hate that, but honestly, I think the actor would hit it out of the park. Anyway, after Parker Industries' hostile takeover of Oscorp, Otto's plan comes into focus. Now that he has the ability to send people to other realities, thanks to the accelerator, he plans to use a Sinister Six-esque team of mercenary supervillains to extract the resources of every other dimension he can find, making him and his company even more powerful in his own. And he's not too concerned about the catastrophic long-term effects on the universe that Doctor Strange tries to warn him about. After a good amount of time with both Holland and Maguire's Spider-Man, I'd also like to see Emma Stone's Gwen Stacy return as well, as the Spider-Gwen of a different world. Now, okay, I know this might be too similar to Into the Spider-Verse, I'll fully acknowledge that. But Emma Stone's Gwen was a big highlight of the Amazing films, and I think it would be a huge waste to not use her. That leaves us with a third act that has Maguire, Holland, and Stone working together to defeat Garfield's Doc Ock across different Earths. Now this is far from a full outline, there's definitely things that would need to be figured out, you may have noticed there wasn't much room for Holland's supporting cast, who would definitely still be in the film, though probably in a very reduced capacity. At the end of the day, this is just a fan pitch of what I would like to see in a live-action Spider-Verse film. Something that tries to give due credit to the big screen incarnations of Spider-Man that have come before, with the added twist of one of them being the main villain. It's a pretty out there concept and involves a lot of nerdy comic book and cartoon references, but I do think it's a way to do justice to each series. In Maguire's Peter, we could see him overcome the doubt and dread that he's felt since the events of Kraven's Last Hunt. In Holland's Peter, we could finally see the MCU Spider-Man come into his own and lead the team. And the dynamic of Garfield's Doc Ock and Emma Stone's Gwen could really take advantage of those actors' great chemistry in the Amazing films.
Wakey, wakey, Spider-Man.
I'd love to hear what you think of my pitch in the comments down below, but I imagine there's some people watching this who feel like they have their own stories to tell. If so, why not check out Storytelling 101, Character, Conflict, Context, and Craft on Skillshare. Taught by best-selling author Daniel Jose Older, this is a course that gets right into the nitty-gritty of fundamental writing techniques and breaks them down in a way that's interesting and immediately helpful. That's because Skillshare designs its classes to be practical, so you can learn what you need to get working on your own dream right away. It's an online learning community with thousands of classes to explore and learn from. So no matter what skill you're looking for, there's gonna be something for you on Skillshare. The first 1,000 people to use that that link in the description will get a free trial of Skillshare's premium membership. So learn something new today by going to skl.sh/CaptainMidnight1121 using that link down below.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.